It's October. Summerville, Alabama. A Tuesday morning just cold enough to see your breath. Alicia Moon, 41, is standing on a concrete step outside a building the size of a large storage shed, watching her 4-year-old son run circles in a patch of dead grass. Braxton Oliver doesn't know what the previous 18 months of his life looked like. He doesn't know about the NICU where he spent his first weeks while his mother was somewhere else and couldn't reach him. He doesn't know about the foster home, the courthouse, the family court checklist. Every item on it worked through, month by month, from a halfway house where 7 women shared a bathroom with no lock on the door. He just knows there's a yard and winter sun, and his mother watching from the step with a cup of coffee going cold in her hand. The building behind her is a converted storage shed, 14 feet wide, 36 feet long. It has a stove with 4 burners, a sink, a bathroom, 2 beds, one for her, one for him, and a front door with a key she keeps in her pocket. She called it everything she ever dreamed of, and she meant it, completely. That's what this video is actually about. Not the building, but what the building does to a person. Most people have a version of a homeless shelter in their head. Rows of cots under fluorescent lights, children in donated sneakers waiting for the next thing to happen. That image is accurate for hundreds of thousands of families on any given night, but it's so familiar it stopped generating the right questions. The question almost nobody asks is, what does it actually feel like to live there? Not what services are offered. What does it feel like at 11 p.m. when your child won't sleep and the room is never actually quiet, and 3 cots away someone is crying and you don't know them well enough to go over, and there's nowhere private to go yourself? What does it feel like to have no door? Not a door as a barrier, as a decision. The ability to choose who is in your space right now, to shut the sound out when the sound gets too heavy. That one thing, which every housed person has and never registers as having, is what a shelter bed cannot give you. Most homeless mothers figure this out within the first few nights. A lot of them leave, not towards somewhere better, outside, which is worse in every concrete way, but is at least a situation they control. Women choosing their car over a shelter is something operators know and don't always know how to fix. The tiny cabin is the attempt at a third option, not the street, not the congregate bed, but something in between that gives a woman the one thing both options take away. Carol Ortiz was 55 the first time she ran out of floor to sleep on. She'd spent the previous 3 years not living her own life. Her grandson Zayden, 4 years old, needed someone no one else available, came to live with her when his parents couldn't manage anymore. She stepped in, stopped working, stopped saving, stopped making plans further out than the next month. She doesn't seem to regret any of it. What she ran out of eventually was cousins, the couch circuit, that specific informal, unacknowledged safety net of women who know enough people willing to make a little room for a while, has a limit you only discover by reaching it. Carol reached it. She looked at her options and felt scared in a specific way. Not the scared of a situation kind, but the deeper one. The scared that comes when the thing you assumed couldn't happen to you has already started. She found a program called Amicaz, run by a nonprofit focused specifically on women and mothers, not general services, not mixed shelter, specifically women. They'd installed 6 emergency sleeping cabins on the side lawn of Meridian Southern Baptist Church in El Cajon, California, and when Carol showed up, there was one available. 96 square feet, a bed against one wall, a narrow dresser beside it, a window on each side, a ceiling fan, and a door with a lock that came with 2 keys, one for her caseworker, one for her. She spent the first month crying. "It took me about a month to stop crying once I got in here," she said, "because I was so scared of where I was going to wind up." It was more specific than grief, the kind of crying that happens when you've been holding something at high tension for a long time, and you're finally somewhere you can put it down. 3 years of managing Zayden's situation, then months of managing her own fear, and now 96 square feet that was specifically hers, her body catching up. Every morning she walked Zayden to the bus stop at the edge of the church parking lot, 3 miles to his school, taken care of. She came back, made coffee, sat by the window. It was the first stretch of time in years that didn't belong to someone else's need. No schedule, No one requiring anything from her for the next half hour. Coffee, a window, morning light, and a quiet that she didn't have to brace for. The bathroom was in a building across the courtyard. Shared, not in the cabin. At night, that meant shoes on, door checked, a walk across the concrete, and whatever the weather was doing. She said it bothered her the first couple of weeks. Then she stopped noticing it entirely. You adapt to whatever your particular place asks of you. The cabin was asking her to walk 40 feet at 2 a.m., and she adapted, because what she was adapting from had been considerably more. Before we continue, I made a guide that shows you how to cut $3,200 a year from your household bills. 51 methods. Link in the description or at zerocostblueprint.com, or you can scan this QR code. Back to the video. What does the inside of one of these cabins actually feel like? That depends on the city, the program, the funding source, and whether the unit was assembled by volunteers on a cold Saturday or manufactured in a factory and shipped on a flatbed truck. The cheapest factory-made versions, the ones that appear in news coverage when a city wants visible proof it's responding to tent encampments, run about 64 square feet, composite panels that snap together, a locking door, a couple of outlets, an LED light on the ceiling, a small heating unit. No plumbing anywhere. That's the emergency tier. That's what the ribbon cutting usually looks like. The volunteer-built versions tend to run closer to 100 square feet, and that difference is not trivial when you're actually living in it. At 100 square feet, you can fit a twin bed against one wall, a narrow dresser, a small desk, and still have enough open floor to turn around without bumping into anything. You can put a chair near the window. You can hang something on the wall. That last detail, hanging something on the wall, sounds like nothing. The first time a resident does it, there's a decision embedded in the act that isn't entirely conscious. You don't put something on the wall in a place you're not planning to stay. The picture going up means some part of you has agreed to this space, has decided, I'm here, I'm making this mine. That part, the willingness to make a place yours, is often one of the first things to go when life falls apart. It comes back slowly. What the cabin almost never gives you is sound privacy. These are light structures. You learn your neighbor's television, her argument on the phone, the specific way her child sounds at 3 a.m. when it's just a dream versus when something's actually wrong. You know her daily schedule before you know her name. Some women find this impossible. Others, who came from the particular isolation of being outside alone, find they needed the proximity more than they knew. Living next to other women in the same exact position, that can only be discovered by living inside it for a few weeks. Robin Draper is 47. Her daughter Avery is 9. They share 144 square feet at Community First Village in Austin, Texas, which is the largest permanent tiny home community for formerly homeless people in the country. Avery has the bed. Robin sleeps on something that converts down from the wall, which Avery finds funny, and Robin says she stopped thinking about around month 3. The village has a communal kitchen a short walk away, a garden that requires tending, a chicken coop that Avery has territorial opinions about, and an outdoor movie setup that runs on weekend nights when the weather cooperates. It has neighbors who know their names. Robin doesn't describe the space as cramped. She calls it efficient. She spent years outside before this. In the deepest part of it, she said she genuinely thought she would end up in prison or dead. She doesn't elaborate on which direction it was heading. The direction was the point, and the direction has changed. Community First has been running since late 2015, started by a man named Alan Graham, who had spent his career in real estate and kept noticing that the structure, the apartment, the room, was necessary but not what actually determined whether someone stayed housed. What determined that was what was around the structure, the web of small stakes and shared presence and people who notice when you haven't been seen. About 85 out of every 100 residents stay housed year to year. That didn't come from a press release. It came from years of tracking where people actually go. The reason isn't the micro home. It's that the village needs you. Avery has opinions about the chickens, and those opinions connect her to neighbors who have their own opinions. And that web of small connections holds her in place. a garden that requires specific people on specific mornings, a market that needs staffing. The village doesn't let you disappear. Not disappearing turns out to be most of what staying housed requires. Nobody warns you about the first week inside. Women who move into these cabins after time outside, or months of sleeping in a car with a hand on the door lock, arrive with a body that has adapted. The shoulders and neck calibrate to a permanent state of readiness. You stop noticing you're tense because you've been tense for so long it's just what being awake feels like. Then you lock the cabin door, and the quiet comes in. And for the first week, maybe 2 weeks, the quiet is suspicious. Your nervous system reads it as a signal. The absence of threat pattern matches to the thing that comes before. 1. You wake at 3 a.m. for no reason. Lie there running the old scan. Footsteps. Voices. Changes in the ambient sound. Nothing. Nothing again. 4:30. Nothing. After enough nights of nothing, door still locked, quiet still just quiet, something in the body gives. Not suddenly. Gradually, the shoulder muscles let go a little. The neck stops holding quite so much. Estella Ortiz, who moved into a North Hollywood cabin after 6 years on the street, noticed it sideways. A few weeks in, she saw her fingernails growing. She'd been biting them for 6 years without ever consciously deciding to. They'd stayed short for so long she'd stopped seeing it as something she was doing. Now she wasn't doing it. The vigilance had found somewhere else to go, or just gone. A woman who spent time in situations where the answer to what keeps me safe tonight was always me, personally, staying alert enough. She gives the lock that job, and when the lock does it night after night, her body eventually accepts the reassignment. Kuneshia Casey goes by Keisha. She's from Seattle. She doesn't give the complete story of what happened. The addiction, the custody loss, the specific sequence that ended with her 8-year-old son in a safe place, and her in a not safe place. That story is hers, and she decides what to carry publicly. What she talks about is the Saturday she showed up at a lot in Seattle with a borrowed hammer she didn't know how to use. The program was called Women for Women. The village they were building was Whittier Heights, Seattle's first single-gender tiny home village, opened in 2018 specifically for women who couldn't function in the mixed-gender shelter environment, who'd been victimized in those spaces, or who just needed, in a way that is completely understandable and almost never discussed in policy circles, to sleep in a building where the people in the next room were other women. Keisha had never built anything before. She learned from tradeswomen who came through a union program, women who had spent careers on commercial job sites and now spent their Saturdays teaching other women which end of the hammer to use, how to measure, how to hold something steady while someone else drives the screw home. By the end of a build day, the thing that had been an empty frame in the morning was a room by afternoon. Someone Keisha had never met would unlock that door for the first time, find the room empty, make it into whatever her particular life required, whatever she chose to put on the walls, whatever small thing she brought in and arranged on the shelf. It's embarrassing for a woman to be out homeless on the street, Keisha said, to not have somewhere to sleep in, to not have someone to talk to or to cry with or to hug. She built homes for women who knew that embarrassment from the inside. The build days have a specific texture. People arrive early, church groups, retired contractors, civic club members who got tired of how they were spending their Saturdays. Most have no construction background. Someone teaches them, and the teaching is built into the day the same way the frame is. By late afternoon, there's a door going into the frame, and the door is always the moment. The frame is potential. The door is a decision. Someone installs the lock. Someone brings a basket to leave inside, soap, a notebook, a candle, a welcome card signed by people the future resident has never met. That says, in the language of objects, that a specific person thought about what you'd need on your first night. The volunteers described the same feeling at the end. They came expecting to feel charitable. Instead, most feel something closer to embarrassment, because of the gap between what this cost and the scale of the problem they've made a small dent in. The thing residents mention that almost never makes it into the coverage is the address. Not in the sentimental sense of having somewhere to belong, the practical sense, the number on the door. The thing you write in the blank that says address on a job application, on a lease application, on a benefits form, on documents filed with a family court that is currently deciding whether you're stable enough to have your children back. A shelter bed is not an address. A tent in an encampment is not an address. You can physically be somewhere for months, a real structure, a real location you sleep in every single night, and still have nowhere that a letter will reliably reach you, and nowhere you can direct someone who needs to find you officially. That invisibility has practical consequences that compound. You cannot apply for most jobs without it. You cannot open certain bank accounts without it. You cannot be the kind of person a family court judge looks at and decides is stable enough. Hope Village in Florence, South Carolina, opened in June 2022 with about 24 tiny homes for women, run by a nonprofit called House of Hope of the PD. One of the things they decided from day one was to give each cabin its own street address, not a shared facility address, a personal one. The specific number on your specific door, appearing in county records as the place where you live. The director put it plainly, you're not homeless when you have your own street address to go to. Tori Paulston moved in with her mother. They had left Tori's father. She doesn't give details about what that situation was, and she doesn't need to. Women who describe leaving with their mothers have told you what you need to know. What Tori said about Hope Village was that it gave them a chance to live without harassment. A front door to open and close, sleep through the night, the address on a piece of paper that says in the official record that she exists, specifically here. The hard parts are real, and the cameras almost never stick around for them. 96 square feet with a child requires a kind of daily spatial negotiation that people in regular houses never think about. There is one table. It is the homework table and the eating surface and the place where things pile up before they get put away. There might be 2 chairs. The bed is also where you sit when there's nothing else to sit on. The window is doing double duty as both natural light and ventilation. And on hot days, those 2 jobs conflict. The shared bathroom is not a minor detail. At El Cajon, it's in a separate building across a small courtyard. At 2 a.m. with a 4-year-old who needs the toilet, that means shoes on, checking the latch on the cabin door, going out into whatever the California night is doing. Carol Ortiz said it bothered her the first couple of weeks and then completely stopped registering. She adapted. But there's a period of adaptation, and it is real, and it asks something of you. Sound privacy is its own form of safety, and most of these cabins don't give you much of it. You can hear through the walls. Your neighbor can hear through the walls. Your phone conversation, your crying, your child's nightmare at 3 a.m., your argument. All of it is part of the communal air. For women who came from situations where being heard meant being in danger, that particular thinness takes time to get used to in a different way. And then there's the clock. Programs with 90-day limits create a specific dread that sets in around week 6. You start running the math. Is there an apartment secured before the deadline? Most of the time, the math doesn't work. The housing market that put most of these women outside is the same market they're trying to re-enter. The cabin starts to feel less like safety and more like a runway that's ending, and the stability the cabin was supposed to provide gets eaten by the urgency of planning before the stability disappears. A 2025 investigation of Los Angeles tiny home villages, a dozen programs, a year of data, found that more than half of residents ended up back outside when they left. 53 out of 100, not in permanent housing, back where they started. Broken heaters on cold nights, water leaks, drugs inside the gates despite prohibition, residents who reported problems and waited weeks for responses that didn't come. 33 people died in the villages during the period studied. 53 out of 100 back outside. What that number means is that the cabin is not, by itself, the answer. It was never the answer. It's a room. The answer is everything organized around the room. A caseworker who actually shows up. A plan built while someone is stable enough to build. 1. A 90-day limit that is a goal rather than a deadline with a cliff on the other side. The places that get this right, Austin's 85% retention versus Los Angeles's 47%, aren't different in cabin quality. They're different in what happens while someone is living in it. The cabin buys time. What happens with the time is the difference. Amanda McDougald was woken up by police at dawn on the day she moved into beloved community village in Denver. Not for anything she'd done, for being somewhere she wasn't supposed to be, which had been the ongoing situation for a while. That was the morning. Asked to move, again, from a place she hadn't wanted to be in anyway. By that evening, she was unlocking a door to a room that was specifically hers. The day we moved, I had gotten woken up by cops that morning as if I was a criminal, she said. That night I was in a house and had a roof over my head. What she said about the congregate shelter system, before the village, before the cabin, was simple and specific. It hadn't worked for her, not because the shelters were cruel, because her sobriety was still fragile enough that it needed a specific thing: predictability. A large facility with 60 people at different stages of different crises is not predictable. Someone else's emergency becomes your emergency at 2 a.m. with no buffer between them. The specific quiet that early recovery needs to take hold, not silence, just the ability to close a door, was the one thing the shelter couldn't give her. The cabin had thin walls. A neighbor's routine bled through the panels every morning and every night. She knew when the TV went off next door before she knew her neighbor's name. But it was hers. She chose when to open the door. She chose when to close it. And that choice, so minor it barely registers as a choice from outside it, was what her particular recovery needed to have a chance. Brittany is 36. She doesn't use her last name with journalists. She ran away from home at 8. The home she ran from was the kind you run from and don't go back to. And what came after? Bridges in Portland, a yurt at some point, a treehouse. A series of structures that were each a different attempt at figuring out what shelter means when shelter has never actually meant safe. Was years of improvising. She got to Agape Village in Portland, Oregon when she was 36. She stayed 4 months. Then she moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. When she talks about the cabin, she doesn't lead with the relief or the gratitude. She leads with what it gave her time to do, which was stop. Not stop moving, stop managing, stop reading the room, stop running the constant background calculation of being a woman without a locked door. What is around me? What might be coming? What do I need to do right now to stay ahead of whatever this is? 4 months, a locked room in Portland. Staff who showed up when they said they would. Other women in the cabins around her who knew exactly what had brought them to the same spot. And Brittany figured out, slowly, not on any particular day, but over the course of those 4 months, what she wanted the next part of her life to look like. That's the cabin's complete job description. Not permanent housing, not a cure. Give someone enough uninterrupted time to want something again, and trust them to figure out the rest. The argument against these cabins is not a stupid one. A 96-square-foot room with a shared bathroom is not housing. The people building these cabins are mostly the first to agree with that. The case critics make, that cities install converted sheds and congratulate themselves, while the rent, the wages, the healthcare costs, the actual machinery that puts women outside in the first place go completely unaddressed, points at something real. The cause is real. Where the argument falls apart is the alternative. In most American cities, the alternative to the cabin is not an apartment. It's a 3 to 7 year waiting list for a housing voucher that, once received, still requires a landlord willing to accept it in a rental market that has spent a decade learning not to. The alternative is a congregate shelter with a 90-person cap, an 80-day limit, no private space, and a communal environment that makes rebuilding from most kinds of damage significantly harder. The cabin builders know this. The good ones say it without embarrassment. What we built is a tourniquet. They're not confused about the cure. The cure is rent that working people can afford, wages that don't leave someone one emergency from the street, healthcare that catches people before they fall. The cabin is not that. But the woman sleeping in her car in January doesn't benefit from the argument about the cure. She benefits from a 96-square-foot room with a working heater and a door that locks tonight, while the city holds the meeting. Nikki Naiman moved into the Mom and Me village in Alabama a few months after Alicia. She came with her 2 daughters. What she said she was most excited about was her daughters coming home from school and finding something cooking in a crock pot. That's specific. A crock pot on her counter. In her kitchen, Her converted shed kitchen on borrowed land in a small Alabama town, releasing the smell of something warm into the afternoon when two girls push open the front door after school. When things have been bad long enough, what you want is not the dramatic reversal. You want the crock pot smell. The girls coming through the door, the counter where the pot sits, the front door that opens onto it from the outside, the key in her pocket when she leaves in the morning, the sound the latch makes catching, a sound every housed person makes a dozen times a day without registering it. Robin Ladner, who runs LifeSource in Somerville, who did not set out to run a tiny cabin village for mothers, who started with a women's recovery program and kept getting asked questions and kept saying yes until there was a village, described what these cabins are actually offering in a way that's hard to improve on. These homes are a space for moms to bond with their kids. Some of these women have never had their own place to live their life with their child. Never had their own place to live their life with their child. Not a permanent solution, just a place that belongs to them, where their child also belongs. Come back to Somerville, Alabama. October. A concrete step. Braxton running in the yard. Alicia Moon is thinking about next year. Not tonight. Not this week. Not whether she can hold things together until morning, which was the question she was asking for longer than it should have been for anyone. She's thinking about the social services job she's been told she'd be good at. And she would be. She knows this, because she knows what it costs to get where she's gotten, and she could help someone else get there faster. She's thinking about what Braxton's life looks like when he starts school. She's thinking about what she wants the year after this to be. That shift, from surviving through each day to actually planning ahead, is what the cabin is for. The shed behind her has no granite countertops, no garage, no guest room, nothing the housing market would bother to photograph. The pipes run in from outside. The ceiling in the bathroom is low enough that she angles her head in the shower. By every standard the housing industry uses, it barely qualifies as a structure. Inside it, a real bed, a small bed with Braxton in it, a stove with 4 burners, a key on a hook by the door that belongs to her and no one else, and a woman on a concrete step, not managing a crisis, not scanning the perimeter, not waiting for the thing that might go wrong in the dark, watching her son run. Thinking about next year. For a woman who's been fighting to get through each day, the ability to think about next year is not a small